Here's a story of trying to get my old beat-up Mad River Outrage MAD14327K900 back on the water. I guess the punchline is, if I'm glad that I never found out what all was going to need to be done, because I would have thought, oh, I can't do all that. But the point is, there's very few parts to a canoe. It's the hull, the gunnels, the thwarts, and beyond that, each one of those can be taken apart and put back together without too much difficulty. The other punchline is there's lots and lots of great right-on-point information out there, and I wish I would have just read this royalex warning that came inside the old canoe. When I got the old canoe, a friend of mine helped me figure where to start with it, and there were no straps and just remnants stuck to the bottom. And my son and I started scraping out the old straps, and some very kind dealer out west had some old Mike Yee straps that he gave to me just for shipping. One of the first of many great kindnesses that the boating community helped me with. Of course, that's a whole nother story, finding the right spot for your knees and the pads and the straps and marking it and preparing it and then using the flame and the G-flex and putting sandbags on it. I thought it might be all ready to go at that point, but unfortunately we moved and I left it out over the winter behind the tool shed, and when I got it out this spring, a lot of damage. The gunnels were cracked, broken, and rotting in many spots. And when I took the old ones off, I also found a long crack in the hull itself. And so I went straight to paddling.com community forums and got great advice and learned that this is actually a pretty common thing to happen over the winter when the difference in the freezing of the gunnels and the hull cause shearing cracks in the hulls. Paddling.com forums are amazing. I've always gotten good advice very quickly. There's always several people who have either run into this exact problem or can refer you to the right place. And for instance, here they sent me directly to Terry Monville at Goujon Brothers. And Terry had two great ideas for repairing the crack in the royalex hull. These started with capping the end of the shear so that it would not keep elongating, either drilling a small hole or poking hot metal through it, then smoothing and slightly enlarging the crack with a reciprocating saw, and then chiseling the sides down to V-shape, which I'd say definitely get a very sharp chisel for this. With a sharp chisel, it carves easily by hand. If it's not super sharp, it just bounces off the rubber. Then using what will soon become your new favorite product, thickened G-flex epoxy, we filled the crack, and I did a hybrid of the two kind of repairs. Terry's classic repair did not call for any fiberglass on the inside. I put fiberglass on the inside too, and then placed a C-clamp at the top to hold them in place until it dried, and put wide packing tape on the outside for a nice smooth finish. This worked really well, and I think it feels about as strong as the rest of the hull now. Next, I had to take care of the gunnels, and same thing, if I would have known all the steps involved, maybe I wouldn't have taken it on. The first thing I did was take out all the old screws and bolts and nuts. And luckily, WeatherMax seems to have all the exact same fixtures from 25 years ago. Even the long bolts and the finish washers and the locking nuts. But you can't get ash gunnels at Lowe's. So I would say the first thing to do is try to find out if there's a canoe supply somewhere near you, or maybe a specialty lumber store near you, because the big problem is shipping 14 or 15 foot long gunnels in the mail or UPS is hundreds of dollars. But the companies like Northwest or Ed's Canoe will ship them to you for somewhere around $100 to $200. It is specially milled with a shiplap cut that you put 2 screws in and epoxy it together. And after you sand it, it looks like just a continuous piece of 14-foot ash. There are plenty of different places with instructions on installing new gunnels, from Mad River Canoe itself to paddling.com and YouTube videos. And I followed these instructions, clamping in the center first, and then moving short distances. And I drilled small pilot holes which were countersunk, and I would stop here for 2 things that I would probably do differently. One is stay wide awake when you're drilling your pilot holes, because just being off a little bit can cause a screw to come out on the undersurface of the gunnels if you're not wide awake for all of these screws. And the other thing is I used deck screws, 1 5/8 inch deck screws, and I don't think I'd do that again. I figured they would be good and weatherproof and were self-tapping to a degree. I did have one of them break on the very end of the gunnels, which were under the most tension at the end. My thinking was, I know that deck screws with star bits are easily removed, and it's been recommended now to me to remove the screws from the gunnels each winter to prevent the cracking and shearing of the hull. And also, it's self-explanatory. At certain points on the gunnels, bow and stern, you would put the screws in from the exterior towards the interior, and through the center of the boat, you would put the screws in from the interior to the exterior. Just look at your old gunnels and you'll see how they did it. At any rate, the gunnels go on very easily. They look beautiful. They take the fish-shaped curve of the Mad River Outrage really well. But the problem was at the bow and stern, the new gunnels destroyed the typical box shape of the Mad River Outrage and instead turned it into a sharp lozenge shape. There was no way to torque the thwarts back into place. The bow and stern had become much too narrow. And let's just hear you try to say, torque the thwarts 3 times fast. I took the gunnels back off, and just to make sure I wasn't seeing things, I put the thwart back in. Now it goes in easily, and now you can see it was originally about an equilateral triangle at the bow and stern. So I went straight back to paddling.net, and from there, people told me that it sounded like I probably needed to do some steam bending of the gunnels to make them fit with the old shape. And now this was something that I had never tried before. I always thought that steam bending wood was an advanced and tricky thing to do, but people convinced me that even I could probably do it. So I made a little box out of some scrap plywood, tipped it downhill slightly, and I went out and borrowed a wallpaper steamer and put that into the lower end of the box and just covered the ends with material so as not to create any pressure. I'm not sure if that was going to happen. I wonder if I was leaking a bit too much. Either way, it did not seem to get the wood quite as hot as I wanted. So I went with plan D or E and used some 4-inch PVC pipe. We did not have any of the special high-grade PVC pipe at any of our stores that is made to tolerate high heats, but the regular 4-inch PVC held up pretty well and just deformed a little bit, and that got the wood very hot. I also read some things about soaking the wood for at least a day or so before you put it in the steamer. I also heard some things about steaming the wood for at least an hour for each inch of thickness of wood. But my first task was to build a jig. I did this with another piece of scrap plywood and traced the exact shape of the canoe, the original shape, and then laid some small ends of 2x4 along the jig and screwed them in and epoxied them in place along the lines of the jig. Another thing that I would do differently, no matter how well you bend the wood, when you take it out of the jig, it does spring back a certain amount. So I would definitely recommend exaggerating the shape of the mold on your jig so that when it springs back, you'll still have about the right bend. I decided to make one side of my jig for the out whales and the other side for the in whales. And this way, two of them could be drying or cooling off at the same time. I bent two pieces of wood at a time and left them sit in the steam box for an hour each, and the wallpaper steamer has enough for 2 hours. And although this may seem obvious, I think it's a really good idea to bend this wood as fast as you can. Don't waste time putting the clamps on. Bend it first and then put the clamps on. And for this reason, it's probably a good idea to have a helper with you, which, if nothing else, keeps you moving along nice and quickly. But take that wood, bend it right away, and then clamp it down, starting from one end until you have it right where you need it. And then, some people say to leave it for several hours, or some say to leave it the same amount of time that you had it in the steam box. Some say to leave it overnight. If you have that option of leaving it overnight, sure, why not? I left it for a couple hours, and with the wood cooled down as much as it was going to, that really didn't seem to cause any trouble at all, and I was able to do all 4 of my gunnels much faster that way. Also 4 gunnels and 2 side bends, one for stern and one for bow on each of the 4. A few more trial and error discoveries I made. One is, don't put the Watco oil on your gunnels until you're about ready to screw them into the boat, because you may wind up needing to do steam bending more than once, or in this case here, another important lesson I learned was that you can't put the seams or the epoxied areas where you put the knockdown gunnels together. You can't let that part go in the steam bath. The screws pull right through and the epoxy doesn't hold. So I sanded those down and redid them and put in new screws. And don't forget how important the end caps are for keeping the shape of your boat. One of my end caps had broken before, and I bought a new oak one from Ed's Canoes. But the thwarts are extremely important too. They hold an awful lot of pressure and weight, and I take them to all be oak also, so I took this opportunity to sand them down and put a coat of spar on the oak. But the gunnels themselves are only going to be treated with Watco oil or Gunnel Guard from Oak Orchard or some such oil product. I put a coat on all the gunnels before I screwed them into place and let the oil dry. Now this time the gunnels and the boat kept their original shape, and now it looked like a Mad River Outrage. I trimmed the ends by following photographs I had taken of the original cut ends of the bow and stern gunnels. Just hand cut them with a saw and tried to recreate the same angles. But it was still difficult getting the thwarts back into place. Before we took the gunnels down, at the very start of the project, I went around and marked where all the thwarts belonged, where the screws for the throw bag ropes belonged. And when I tried to put the thwarts back in, it was still a little bit too tight. So we decided to design a little piece of 2x4 that would fit just around the gunnels and that would help us spread them. And we figured we'd have to apply a little butane, so we got Mjolnir, the sledgehammer, out, and very delicately pounded until the thwarts easily slid in. All right, see if we can get it in a little more. When you hit it hard enough, it does wedge perfectly in there. And then we were able to drill the holes and put the long bolts with the finish washers and the lock nuts, and left 1/8 of an inch between the thwarts and the hull. We screwed the end caps into the gunnels before taking the spreader bar out. Then we drilled holes and put the Mike Yee strap holders back in. And lastly, we put the ropes for the throw bags in. And then it was time to put that pretty little boat up on my boat trailer. And I rushed out to the Presumpscot River, where there was a little bit of flow. And it's a very pretty scenery. I got to use the boat slide finally.
Back on the water, baby.
And it was quite a joy to get on the water and see what this little thing could do.
So lucky.